to read the tiny engraved words. A life without rain is like the sun without shade. With short, unpolished nails, she scraped the charm from her palm and flipped it over. R. Michael Jewelers, Walton. She pressed her forehead against the window, forcing herself to breathe deeply and recalling the woman who had given her the necklace. Walton. The name shifted her jaw, as if moved by her mother's invisible hand, but she shook her head. It was 1,000,000 to 1 shot that it was the same town. It would take sheer luck, something that had always run on a parallel with her life, never intersecting. As she stared out the window, a small shape darted from the grass on the other side of the highway and onto the shoulder of the road. Headlights for an approaching car appeared on the horizon, 2 pinpoints gradually growing larger. The shape moved into the arc cast by a streetlight, and Suzanne recognized the pointed head and thin, whip-like tail of an opossum. Pushing her hands against the window in an impotent offer to help, she glanced again at the approaching car, then back at the animal, its quivering nose pointing into the road. "Don't," Suzanne mouthed, but slowly the animal waddled into the lane and stopped, watching as the car bore down on it. The entire scene was too much like her mother's fascination with the bottle, complete with Suzanne's own helplessness, and she shut her eyes on the inevitable, only opening them when she could hear the dying strains of a country song from the radio of the car as it passed. Peering out the glass, she could make out the small animal in the middle of the road, curled into a tight little ball under the crescent moon. It wasn't dead, but it wasn't doing anything to prevent another onslaught either. Abruptly, she stood and announced to no one in particular, "I'm getting off here." The driver looked up in surprise as she stepped off the bus, the gravel crunching under the heels of her flip-flops. "Your ticket goes all the way to Atlanta." She gave him a half smile. "I've changed my mind." Spotting her one compact piece of baggage sitting on the pavement with the rest of the unloaded luggage, she stooped and picked it up. Holding the oversized canvas bag by her side and adjusting her backpack-style purse over her shoulders, she glanced at the other 2 people standing with the driver. She recognized the lady with the big hair and nodded briefly. Standing behind her was the man who had to have been the owner of the voice. He towered over the 2 people in front of him, standing somewhere around 6'4". He wore a button-down, white Oxford cloth shirt tucked into wrinkled khakis that looked as if he'd slept in them. A red whiteboard marker and a pencil protruded from his shirt pocket. She raised her eyes to study his face and was surprised to find him staring at her chest. Shifting her suitcase to her other hand, she sneaked a glance down at her shirt and noticed that she hadn't tucked her necklace back in, and it was now dangling over the mound of her breasts, calling attention to their size. Disgusted, she twisted away from him and turned toward the driver. "Can you tell me if there's a place around here to call a cab?" There was a brief silence before the tall man drawled, "You're not from around here, are you?" Suzanne frowned up at him, wondering how he knew that about her. She briefly thought about stepping back onto the bus in its cool anonymity. But then she remembered the petrified opossum waiting its chance to be roadkill, and she ground her heels a little deeper into the gravel. "No, I'm not. Could you recommend a cab company to call?" The older woman stepped forward, her perfume reaching Suzanne first. "Sugar, are you visiting someone in Walton? Joe and I could give you a lift." Suzanne cut her off. "No, thank you. I'll take a cab." She looked around, spotting a service station across the 2-lane highway. She didn't have a cell phone. Too expensive and too easy to trace. Surely there would be a phone at the gas station, and she could call a cab to take her to the nearest hotel. Someplace sterile and impersonal, where she could get her thoughts together and figure out what she would do next. With a brief nod goodbye, she headed across the road, avoiding looking at the opossum and making sure she checked for oncoming traffic first. As she neared the service station, she stared at the large neon sign.